Well, why don't we let our viewers know a little bit of the backstory of Debbie Davies. You grew up in Northern California?
Actually, Southern.
Southern California.
Yeah.
And in the 50s, late 50s through the 60s, what were your musical influences in those days?
Well, my folks were both musicians.
Okay.
So I was hearing music from the time I can remember. You know, my dad had a hi-fi back then.
Yeah.
You know, one speaker that was like gigantic. And I just remember sitting against it, being like 3 years old.
Yeah.
You know, and like I loved feeling the vibrations. And I remember having this sort of epiphany at one point going, I know what's coming next.
Really?
Yeah, and I didn't know what that meant really, but it's just I was addicted to this thing. My mom played classical piano.
Okay.
And then during the day she would, you know, have like pop radio on. So I was hearing all of that. My dad was like involved in, you know, the Hollywood music singing scene.
Okay.
So he was into all the really pop vocal groups. He sang with a group called the Pied Pipers, and he was into the high-lows. But he had toured when he was younger, like with big bands. So we heard all kinds of jazz.
Yeah.
You know, on the mono and then eventually stereo. So.
Right.
You know, I kind of grew up. I was very early addicted to music. So.
Okay. And with this addiction, why would a young girl, choose a guitar and not even an acoustic guitar? Why an electric guitar?
Well, of course I had an acoustic guitar
To
first.
start, yeah.
And I had the obligatory piano lessons.
Okay, yeah, and the folk music craze, probably like me.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
Peter, Paul, and Mary, strumming those.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
you
no.
know, and that doing that helped me to learn to sing and play together, to coordinate the two. But I did have, as soon as I'm a typical baby boomer. As soon as I saw the Beatles on TV, I was like, I want one of those.
Yeah, I know.
And that was an electric guitar. But my folks didn't get me one. I had to wait until I was, you know, on my own to buy my own electric guitar.
Okay.
It was just not, it wasn't socially accepted back then. There was no support for it. It was completely a boys' club.
That's right.
Everything was gender specific. So I was actually ended up being kind of a late bloomer. You know, I never stopped banging around on my acoustic, but I was out on my own. I moved to Northern California. I was taking college classes and working, and so that's really where I started playing. It was just like, I realized like, I still want to play electric guitar.
Yeah.
So,
and you were seeing a bunch of blues people up in Northern California.
Yeah.
Would that have been like late 60s?
No, that was the 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, because I didn't start playing, you know, until I was 24. Is when I finally, you know, committed to it and finally realized this desire is not going away.
Yeah.
And I've got to do it.
Yeah.
You know, I was just sort of lost in a lot of ways and just whatever. I just said, I'm going to do it.
Sure.
So.
And you know, there were no female role models for you at the time because you're only a few years younger than Bonnie Raitt.
Right.
And so, you know, she was somewhat of a role model, I would imagine.
She was
71. She has a record out, and
absolutely. Well, when I first saw Bonnie Raitt, you know, that was a major moment for me because I had never seen a woman playing the style of music that I loved.
Yeah.
You know, with an electric guitar, and it was just like.
Yeah.
So I was a major Bonnie Raitt groupie, and you know, went to as many of her shows up and down the coast as possible.
That's cool.
You know, but it was funny because I would watch her play and I'd go, well, I think she's awesome, man, if I could only sing like that.
Yeah.
But I want to play like him. It was her guitar player, Will McFarlane.
Okay.
You know, and so, and I didn't want to like be a copycat, like, oh, I'll play slide like Bonnie. I just loved the music so much.
Right.
And I mean, she's the consummate everything performer. So I just, you know, I was learning like Eric Clapton stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, then I got turned on to like all of the B.B. King, Albert Collins, Albert, and a lot of them played up and down the coast
That's
there.
right.
Got to see a lot of them live.
Yeah.
And just started doing it, you know. Somebody would show you a lick.
Right.
And you'd try and, the main thing I tried to do was learn to take licks off of records.
Yeah.
So that's really how I learned to play.
You said I'm of the baby boomer generation where I saw the Beatles, but also that baby boomer generation learned to play the guitar off the record.
Right.
You played the record, you lifted the needle up, and then you tried it, and then you put the needle back down, and you tried it again.
It was pretty tedious.
Yes.
But I mean, as a beginner, I was slow, so it was
Yeah.
okay that that was slow. You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really. There was you had to really want it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Really want it. There was no support for it. There were no learning videos or, like, hey, there's the guitar class in school. There was nothing like that.
I know.
No.
The school that I was teaching at right down the road here, they now have 2 sections of a guitar class, 15 kids in each one, and they've had it for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And they all carry their guitar to school and they learn, and you didn't have that back in those days, when you and I grew up. Yeah.
Well, and when I was doing it, people would go, what are you going to do with that?
Right. Yeah.
And when I was touring with Albert, sometimes I'd, walk into the club with my guitar and they'd think I was the roadie or his girlfriend carrying his stuff,
Yeah.
And that's how they would talk to me. And, I just didn't say anything. I just figured, well, I'll start playing and it'll become clear as to what's going on.
Sure.
So.
Well, you have something, though, that these kids in guitar class don't have, and that is experiences with John Mayall and Albert Collins. And can you tell our viewers what, I know you worked with Maggie Mayall as an opening act for John.
Yeah.
And then you worked 3 years with Albert Collins. So you got to...
Those are true blessings that I've had, and
Yeah.
that a lot of other players my age have had, to be able to go out with the real guys,
Right.
The guys who were at the beginning of this kind of music and really set the standard for it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most of them have passed now.
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful era and a wonderful time. It's kind of like that's how it was done in blues and jazz.
Right.
It was that you would apprentice, quote, quote, you would go out with somebody who was like much better and back them and learn all of the, all of that before you went out on your own, know. I was really fortunate and blessed to get to work with Maggie Mayall and John Mayall. I mean, we were the opening group for him on tour, and John used to ask me up on stage, and he really took me into his stable of how he has, sort of mentored and fathered guitar players and whatnot, and he sort of brought me into that little group, and it was real special for me because early on that was a big influence.
Yeah,
that album, Beano album.
That's right, with Clapton on it, sure.
And then touring with Albert, that was just like one of those things where you kind of put it out to the universe, what you'd want to do and what's next, and be like, well, what if I could go on the road with one of my blues idols?
Yeah.
And it's like it happened. So
Yep.
that was, that was like the prime time of my life and the highlight. I can't say enough about it. Just Albert was a wonderful cat,
I know.
And
I mean, the stories I've collected about him just give me so much joy and comfort, and what kind of a man he must have been, and how lucky you were to be with him for all those years. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
And between the two, John and Albert, they're so different. Their styles of approaching the road and life in general was so different that I was fortunate to kind of be able to select, well, I'll take this from that and that from that.
Right. Working with those guys, you probably found out too, here you were thinking that music was just a guitar and loud, and probably working with those guys, you found out that there was a lot more that went to it. There was the personal side of it that they put into the music.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because people will say, oh, did you learn to play from Albert? And I'm kind of like, well, I kind of had to know how to play to even be hired.
Yeah.
No, I didn't learn to play from Albert. What I learned from Albert was, I always say, grace.
Yeah.
Grace under fire, because the road's not easy.
Yeah.
And just seeing how he, dealt with all kinds of wacky, crazy situations is the biggest thing I learned. Actually, I brought my amp on the first night of the tour, my Super Reverb, and I thought it was broken, because no matter how loud I turned it, I couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
So that band was loud.
Right.
So that band was louder than I had thought things were. So it was powerful, though. Muscular,
Right.
I love that kind of blues.
That's right, yeah. And what was it, about 1992, the front of the stage started calling to you?
Well, I had been doing my own band off and on, you know,
Yeah.
and like when I was out with Mayall, Coco and I had a band together
Right.
that we would book in between the tours.
Yeah.
But then once I started working with Albert, the schedules were different,
Yeah.
and I started booking my own band in between. But it was Albert who encouraged me. He said, you know, you've really got to, you know,
Yeah.
do it. You really got to go out there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. After 20 years now on your own, the road, the recordings, what have you learned about this musical journey that you're on?
Wow. I've learned to respect it more and more, and
Yeah.
respect the people who are doing it and working really hard at it. Really respecting the the cats who came before me, because it was so hard
Yeah.
back then.
Yes.
You know, I mean, although now it's so much more expensive. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of ways that it's harder now. But I mean, you figure when Albert Collins first started doing the road, I mean, this was before civil rights
Yeah.
had been passed. So as hard as the road is to have all of that on top of it, you know, the more you do it, the more you respect everybody
Yeah.
who's doing it.
Yeah. Well, we thank you for all you do for the blues, and
Thank you,
especially in the
Art.
way that you keep these legends alive, you know, both in your shows with your music, but also in the stories that you tell about them. It's
Cool.
You're doing your part. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I'm Art Tipaldi. This is Don Odells Legends. Now enjoy Debbie Davies. Thank you.